Wireless access points are the heart and soul of wireless networks. So in this video, we're going to take a close look at WAPs, and I really want to go over some of the terminologies and various terms that you will see on the exam and in the real world when you're dealing with wireless access points. Now, these are usually referred to simply as WAPs, WAPs, or as apps, APs. They both mean the same thing. Now, the wireless access point is the little device that translates the data from the wired network into RF or radio frequencies for use by wireless adapters in our client devices. And then the wireless devices send a signal back to the WAP, and it translates the RF from the client back into data and injects it back onto the wired network. Pretty straightforward stuff, right? And there are a few terms that you need to understand when we're talking about WAPs and their placement when implementing wireless service in regards to the Network Plus exam. So let's go through these here. First of all, there's a term that you will hear and see on the exam called density, and this refers to the number of users within a specified area. Now notice that's not the number of devices, that's not the number of people on the network, but that's the number of users. Now think about this. If I'm going to put a wireless access point, say in a small restaurant, well, how many users are going to be in there, right? It's a small restaurant. We can only cram 40 people in there. So that's not that big. And we can also make an assumption there. We're going to talk about it in just a moment here about how many people will actually be on the wireless network. However, what if we think about a university cafeteria where there's maybe 600 students in there at once? Okay, so we got a lot more density, and that is the number of users within a specified area. Now, device density really does speak to the number of devices within a specified area. Go back to the restaurant. Only 40 people can come in. Most of the people are coming in for our blue plate special, right? Meat and 2 vegetables. They're not there to get on the internet, and probably a certain demographic there doesn't use the internet that much, okay? So we want to be really concerned here with, number one, the number of users in that area, and then the number of devices that will be in that area when we're trying to lay out the number of WAPs and the location. Now, SSID, the Service Set Identifier, is a hot topic for wireless access points, especially on these exams, because the SSID is the network name that is set on the WAP that you will have to know or input to connect to a WAP. Now, most of the time, this SSID is broadcast, and when we turn on our device, we can just see it. And this is very similar to a workgroup name in Windows networking. I just simply have to put that name into my client, and then the client can connect to that particular wireless access point and be on that particular wireless network that's being created by that wireless access point. Now, a wired controller, this is something else you will see in corporate environments. This is a separate device that provides services to what's called a thin access point. Now, the idea here is that instead of buying a self-contained wireless access point that has its configuration and all that stuff loaded into it like we normally do for home environments, with a wired controller, we're going to use separate devices. We're going to have this wired controller in a rack back in the server room, and it's going to have ports on the back, and we're going to run Ethernet cables out to this, what's called a thin access point that we're going to mount somewhere in there. And this cable coming from the wired controller feeds the data feed to it, and it also manages that AP. So we can put multiple access points all over our building and then have them all connected back to the wired controller. And the AP will authenticate to the wired controller when the AP boots up. The wired controller provides all the configuration information for the AP, and it also functions as a switch for the wireless network. Now, this is really cool because it allows us to manage a lot of these things very, very easily. And we can also provide services for a lot of separate APs simultaneously. So if you see wired controller on the exam, that's what they're talking about. We also have the ability to do centralized administration. VLAN pooling, this is another term you may hear. If I'm using a lot of APs with a wired controller, I'm going to have a lot of traffic coming in at once. Well, I can use a VLAN, and I can create a group configuration of VLANs to use load balancing in heavy wireless traffic. What's going to happen here is every time a new wireless client joins the network, we can automatically assign them to a successive VLAN in this pool of VLANs. And now each user basically has their own little network that load balances wireless traffic over several VLANs. Pretty cool functionality. Now, BSS, Basic Service Set, Here we're talking about a wireless network consisting of a single wireless access point. A BSSID, a basic service set identifier, is the MAC address of the basic service set access point. ESS, an extended service set, is where you have two or more basic service sets that are utilizing multiple access points. And this enables clients to roam between an area without losing a connection. So if we're trying to provide wireless in a really large room, ESSID, similar to SSID, but it's just a network name for an extended service set wireless network design. Now keep in mind, the access points in an ESS can have different names, so that's kind of a weird one, but that can happen. BSA, a basic service area, is the coverage area of a particular access point. Watch for these terms. You'll see them on the exam. Just be familiar with them, and you should be able to turn most of the questions into relatively easy undertakings.